Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and you're listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by Earth Mama's Apothecary and littleshaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. Today I wanted to talk to you about hoovering. This is something that nearly all people involved with pathologically narcissistic loved ones experience on some level, so I thought we could address it on the show today. There are three main phases or stages in a relationship with a narcissistic person. These stages usually rotate or pass in a cycle and can last for varying lengths of time depending on the specific situation. Any of the phases could be as short as a few hours or stretch on for years. These stages are idealize, devalue, and discard. The idealization phase often happens when the narcissistic person first meets somebody. If the narcissist is a parent, this can happen when the child is first born or until they reach an age where they begin to challenge or question and resist the narcissist. This phase is characterized by love bombing, idealizing both the relationship and the other person, and putting the love object, which is you, on a pedestal. The person they see in this phase is the person that many victims believe is the real self of the narcissist, and it's the phase that most people spend their time trying to get back to. This is also, of course, the person the narcissist would like the victim to believe they really are, and who they themselves would like to believe they are. So it's often not all that difficult to get the victim to agree to give them another chance. This is very, very important to the hoovering process. The devaluation stage happens when the narcissist has realized that the victim is not perfect. More importantly, they realize the victim does not see them as perfect either. The narcissistic person's idealistic fantasy of the relationship, their partner, and themselves has been punctured by the victim's unexpected mediocrity or unforgivable human flaws and keen perception. You were supposed to believe that they're perfect. They are devastated that the victim no longer sees them as flawless, and to the narcissist, imperfection is intolerable. If you're not perfect, you are not worthy of anything. The narcissistic person often feels betrayed and hurt and embarrassed by this. They're afraid they're going to be rejected, and they take it out on the victim, endeavoring to reject their partner before they themselves can be rejected. It's sort of like, I'll get you before you get me. In a very real sense, narcissists feel that there has been an injustice done to them. You were supposed to believe that they hung the moon, that they're always right, that they're always strong, that they're always correct. Now look, here you are, pointing out their mistakes, accentuating their flaws, exposing their weaknesses, probably laughing at them and thinking how much better than them you are. How can you do that to somebody you love? The conclusion is that you wouldn't. Therefore, you don't love them. If you love them, you would play along. You would believe and say and tell everyone else that they're perfect. Since you're not doing that, it's obvious that you don't really care, and you will be punished for that. The fact that you're not actually doing any of it doesn't really matter. The discard phase or stage of the relationship happens when the narcissist has either damaged the relationship to the point that they can no longer get anything useful out of it, or when they have been exposed so blatantly that they can no longer continue on. For example, a narcissist that has exhausted the victim to the point that they're just completely drained may drop the victim and then move on to somebody else. Or the victim might regard the narcissist with such overt hostility because they've been abused for so long that there's no real interaction between the two anymore, even though the relationship is not technically over. In these situations, the narcissist cannot get what they need from the relationship, and they start to look elsewhere. This often results in discarding the victim. Narcissists cannot maintain the false image they need to believe in when they're around people who know who they really are. Many times, they just leave the situation altogether. Hoovering occurs when a separation has taken place, either because the narcissistic person has discarded the victim or the victim is trying to end the relationship. It is a return to the love bombing phase of the relationship for the purpose of regaining control over the situation. Pathologically narcissistic people attempt to hoover a victim back in when they're feeling vulnerable and needy for some reason. For example, if a new relationship didn't work out and they now feel rejected. Or if their partner ended the relationship and they're not ready to move on yet because they don't have anyone or anything new to cling on to. It's called hoovering because of the Hoover vacuum cleaner. That's what they're trying to do, essentially. Suck the victim back into the situation. There may be apologies, tears, threats of suicide or self-harm, epiphanies, and come to Jesus moments where they claim they've seen the light and they now understand what the problem is, promises to change, declarations of undying love, or any other manner of behavior that is designed to convince the victim into doing what the narcissist wants. Many times, the things the narcissist says or does are the things that the victim has been waiting for. They may admit fault, take responsibility, start going to counseling or therapy. They might get on medication or start taking medication again that they had stopped. They may stop having inappropriate interactions with the opposite sex or whatever it is that the victim wanted them to do. It can seem like a miracle. Suddenly, this person understands and realizes everything you've been trying to tell them for months, maybe even years. They finally get it. Things can finally change, right? Most people believe that the narcissist's motives are insincere when hoovering is occurring and that they're just saying what they need to say to get what they want. Now, that's very possible. It's also possible that they really do mean it at the time. To a pathologically narcissistic person, feelings are facts. Therefore, the truth and the facts are dictated solely by how they're feeling in that exact moment. If their feelings change, and they will, the truth is going to change. The facts are going to change. This is why you are seen as a good person when they're happy and a bad person when they're upset. The real truth is, it doesn't matter whether they mean it at the time or not, because either way, it won't last. Regardless of the reason, as soon as they're not feeling vulnerable and scared anymore, they're going to go right back to how they always behaved because this is how they operate. It's their coping strategy, their mode of operation. And unless they're dedicated to learning entirely different, new ways to get their needs met, it's not going to change. Resisting a Hoover is very difficult. It's one of the reasons relationships with pathologically narcissistic people are so hard to walk away from. Suddenly, your mom is the mother you always wished for, or your partner is the spouse you always dreamed of. It may even last for a period of time, which makes it even easier to believe and even more crushing when the inevitable letdown comes. There's no easy trick or life hack to resist hoovering. It takes willpower and an absolute dedication to the truth. If you let the narcissistic person talk you out of what you know to be the truth because you want to believe them more than you want to believe the facts, you're probably in for a pretty big disappointment. You have to be strong enough to resist the desire to believe if the facts up to this point have shown you that it's not likely to be true. It's up to you to address your own fantasies about this situation. The narcissistic person is only going to use them against you, either consciously or because this is all they know how to do. This is one of the reasons no contact is usually recommended. It's usually not realistic to expect that a pathologically narcissistic person is going to respect your boundaries, stop trying to manipulate you, and leave you alone. It would be nice and it would be fair, but it would not be very likely. It's up to you to control your level of contact with this person and your reaction to them. If you are being hoovered, it can be very easy to slip back into fantasy mode and the promises of, one day, I will, we will, I won't, I'll stop, I'll try, I'll go, I could. It's easy to believe in those promises and those hopes for a not too distant future. But just remember something. Where you are right now at this very minute is the future. You are in the future that you were hoping for 6 months ago, a year ago, 10 years ago. Does it look like you thought it would? If not, what makes you think it ever will? I hope this clears a few things up for you. As always, I look forward to your comments, questions, and suggestions, so please keep those coming. I take appointments online and over the phone Monday through Friday. So if you're interested in speaking with me, you can visit littleshaman.org and click the Book an Appointment tab to go ahead and do that. You've been listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by littleshaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. May the Great Spirit bless you and have a wonderful day. Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and you're listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by BetterHelp.com and littleshaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. Today I wanted to talk to you about the cycle of narcissistic relationships. This is something virtually everyone involved with any narcissist in any kind of relationship deals with in some way, so I thought we could dedicate an episode of the show to talking about it. There is a cycle or a pattern to the way that narcissistic people behave in relationships. Doesn't matter what kind of relationship it is, it could be parent, co-worker, spouse, they all follow the same pattern. That pattern is idealize, devalue, discard. We are going to explore what these things can look like and why they happen. Idealization is defined as regarding or representing something as perfect or as better than it is in reality. This is a perfect description of the idealization phase of narcissistic relationships, which is often characterized by something called love bombing. Love bombing is a very intense campaign of attention focused on another person or people, usually consisting of compliments, affirmations, proclamations that someone is perfect or a perfect match, and affection that seems to become very intense very fast. The idealization phase of the relationship often creates very strong feelings in people very quickly, resulting in people making decisions, commitments, and ignoring or not seeing red flags because they're swept up in the emotion of the relationship. One of the first red flags we often see in pathologically narcissistic people is their tendency to overreact. And it's very important to remember that this does not only refer to negative situations. The idealization of you and the relationship is an overreaction. Behavior during the idealization phase can look like giving constant or unrealistic compliments, gifts, or praise, giving or demanding constant attention, wanting and or talking about committing very quickly, ignoring boundaries and requests to slow things down, saying that you are connected or that you're soulmates very quickly, talking about intense and strong emotions very quickly when they don't know you very well, talking about how perfect you are or the relationship is, trying to sell you on how perfect they are or that they would be for you, talking about being rescued or rescuing you, believing the relationship is deeper or more intimate than it actually is. Idealization happens in part because many narcissistic people form attachments very quickly. Their emotions are unstable and out of control, and their need for other people is paramount. They legitimately depend on the input of others for survival, so taking time to get to know people or seeing them as they truly are is not really an option. Other people are very important to narcissists for this reason. Their value in this area is extremely high. Pathologically narcissistic people cannot experience themselves except through the reactions and the reflections of others. They have no true self-concept and no ability to create or sustain self-worth. So they use other people as kind of a psychic mirror to be able to assess who and what they themselves are. This is something they are required to do in order to survive because of abilities that they do not have. It's not optional, and there's no other way to do it. There are those who believe that the idealization from narcissists is very calculated, and this is certainly true for some of them. For example, psychopathic narcissists do not need the reflection from other people in order to survive. They don't seem to have the ego conflicts or struggles with shame that we see in non-psychopathic narcissists. Their goal is not survival. They do not depend on other people to experience themselves. They do not struggle with self-worth or identity, and their motives are not subconscious. Therefore, there would be no sincere emotion in anything they do. They simply want something from the other person, often something tangible like money. They know they want it, and they're trying to get it. It's no deeper than that, and there is no belief on their part that any of their professed emotions are real. This is different than non-psychopathic narcissists who often believe they do genuinely care about other people. They don't understand how emotions or relationship functions for other people, and they mistakenly believe that their feelings change because of the other person instead of understanding that the trigger for this is actually within them, and it has nothing to do with anything the other person is doing or not doing. Psychopaths are aware that they don't care, and this does not change. This is one of the reasons, by the way, that looking at behavior alone is not enough when it comes to understanding pathological narcissism. Predominantly psychopathic narcissists may engage in many of the same behaviors as narcissists that are not psychopaths, but their motives and the internal experiences driving the behavior are not the same. So that's just something to think about. During the idealization phase, the narcissist sees other people as perfect because other people see them as perfect. It's very possible the feelings they are describing are sincere, or at least as sincere as it's possible for them to be, because they're totally in love with the reflection of themselves that this person is showing them. Of course, they want to be around this person all the time and soak up as much of that as they can. But the emotion they're displaying, sincere though it may be in many situations, is not for the other person. It's for themselves. When you look at a mirror, you don't see the mirror, you see yourself. The mirror is simply the tool through which you are viewing and experiencing yourself. During the idealization phase of the relationship, they want to look at that as much as possible. They want to be around somebody that feels that way about them. This need to see themselves as perfect is what actually causes the devaluation stage of the relationship. Devaluation is the opposite of idealization. If idealization is defined as regarding something as perfect or as better than it is in reality, meaning that you're assigning more value to something than it realistically has, devaluation is assigning less value to something than it realistically has. If something is no longer perfect, and it must be perfect in order to have any value to this kind of person, then not being perfect anymore equates to having no value at all. Remember, this is all about you being the mirror. If a mirror reflects a less than perfect image, you probably wouldn't want to use it anymore. In order for the fragile fiction of idealization to last, people can never get to know each other. They can never see each other make a mistake, have a flaw, make a bad choice, or do anything that results in a loss of perfection. Of course, this is unreasonable and ridiculous. It's not possible to be around somebody and still believe that they're perfect. You will see their flaws, their mistakes, their bad choices. They will see yours. In a normal relationship, some idealization does happen, but the relationship survives it. It recovers and people adjust to who the other person actually is in reality. Devaluation occurs in narcissistic relationships because narcissists cannot do that. The revelation that the person is not perfect is unforgivable. Many narcissists will even accuse other people of lying to them or tricking them by pretending to be someone that they're not. The devaluation of the other person can be triggered by essentially anything and nothing. It could be that they saw the narcissist's imperfections, even if they don't see it that way, or it could be that the narcissist saw theirs. Either way, once this happens, the relationship is essentially changed forever. The reflection the narcissist sees from the other person is not perfect anymore. It's been damaged. This is devastating for them because they spend their entire lives trying to avoid reality and they cannot forgive someone who caused that. As high up on the pedestal a person was, that's how far they're going to fall. And the result is often shocking for people. I'm now worthless because I made a mistake or because I saw you make one. But this is how it is. If you really loved them, if you were really the person that you said you were, you would not see anything they do as wrong, ever. Because you did, you have proven once and for all that you really don't care. This is, of course, backwards, unreasonable, and unrealistic. But this is a person who lives in a fiction. And if you can't live in it with them, you don't care about them. It is sadly ironic that regardless of whether someone would actually agree to do that or not, it still won't work. Part of the reason narcissistic people need others is because narcissists are in a zero-sum game. A zero-sum game is a situation where each person's loss or gain is exactly balanced by the loss or gain of the other person. This means narcissists can't win unless someone else loses. They can't succeed unless someone else fails. They can't be the victim unless someone else is the villain. They can't be right unless someone else is wrong. It is only through the reality of the other person that they can experience the reality of themselves. When you add that to a situation where a person struggles with pathological delusional shame and cannot take responsibility for anything because of it, you end up with a situation where one of the other person or people's primary functions in the relationship is to be the scapegoat and the blame holder. So even if the other person in a narcissistic relationship strives to only ever see the narcissist as perfect, they still can't succeed because the narcissist by default must blame this person for everything, including their own thoughts, feelings, and actions. When you are to blame, you cannot be perfect. Either way, you lose. Behavior during the devaluation stage can look like spiteful, nasty, or inconsiderate comments, accusations of you having cruel or inconsiderate motives and feelings, spending less time communicating or pushing other people away, getting irritated over small things and blowing up or going silent, passive-aggressive behavior, refusing or being unable to explain why they're upset or what other people have done wrong, accusations of sabotage, cruelty, abandonment, or rejection, personal and character attacks, accusing others of not caring enough or of feeling ways that they don't feel, triangulation and smear campaigning. Narcissists also have ridiculously unreasonable expectations for people and for relationships. They demand to be the most important thing in any relationship, in any situation at all times. Underneath the heroic or needy or self-assured or arrogant or capable or whatever other image they're projecting is a very fragile, very sensitive, self-loathing and shame-based ego that reads abandonment, rejection, insult, and contempt into literally everything. One of the functions of the other people in these relationships is to somehow be the person they don't feel this from. The one person they don't get that from. This is, of course, impossible, and evaluation occurs partially because people fail to do that. This is one of the things that can lead to the discard phase of the relationship. Discarding is what it's called when a narcissist simply ends the relationship. There is often no warning or reason given. They just walk away without a word. Even if a relationship has gone on for years, fluctuating between idealization and devaluation, discard is still possible and often does happen. The reasons for discard can vary, but only on the surface. The true reason for discard is always the same. The reflection of themselves that the narcissist is receiving from the other person is not what they want to see. They cannot deal with what they are seeing reflected from the other person, whatever that is. This mirroring is any other person's primary function in any narcissistic relationship, and if they cannot fulfill it, they will be discarded and or replaced with someone who can. This is, of course, blamed on the other person. Discard can be very confusing and painful. Often people don't understand what has caused the end of the relationship or why they've been discarded. Attempts to ask the narcissist often go nowhere. This is not a person in touch with their feelings or cognizant of their motives the majority of the time, and they are certainly not worried about exploring these things out of consideration for anybody else's feelings. They may not even know why they've ended the relationship. Their reasons may be odd, unclear, or make no sense. Attempts to get clarity or closure will often be met with indifference or even cruelty because they no longer care about keeping that person around. Their primary purpose is no longer necessary. Narcissists don't have relationships with people they can't get things from. When others are no longer important in this way, which is really the only way they actually can be important, they cease to matter at all. Discard does not always happen, and discard does not mean that the narcissist will never come back around. Some relationships simply go through cycles of idealization and devaluation over and over and over until the narcissist dies. The narcissist may discard and stay away for years, then attempt to reach out again all of a sudden out of the blue. It's important to remember that through all of the cycles of the relationship, none of the fluctuations in the narcissist's emotions or behavior are your fault. They're not caused by you, they're not because of you. This is an unstable person with a lot of different challenges, many of which make them an absolute nightmare as a partner, friend, or caregiver. They should not be in relationships at all, to be perfectly honest. However, they do get in them. Their unique way of functioning requires them to seek out relationships with other people. It's important to understand what's going on so that you will know what you're dealing with. Taking the confusion out of it de-weaponizes the behavior, making it possible to deal with it in a clearer way. I hope this clears a few things up for you. As always, I look forward to your comments, questions, and suggestions, so please keep those coming. I take appointments online, over the phone, via text, via messenger, via email, and through Skype around the world. So if you're interested in speaking with me one-on-one, you can visit littleshaman.org and click the Book an Appointment tab to go ahead and do that. I teach workshops, seminars, and clinics throughout the year, so if you're interested in seeing what we're running this month, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that as well. You've been listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by BetterHelp.com and LittleShaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. May the Great Spirit bless you and have a wonderful day. Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and you're listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by LittleShaman.org and BetterHelp.com. That's me, Little Shaman. Today I wanted to talk to you about romanticizing the good times with narcissistic people. This is something many people have experienced, so I thought we could talk about it on the show today. One of the hallmarks of relationships with pathologically narcissistic people is the cycle of good times and bad times, where the narcissist alternates between decent or loving behavior and cruel, abusive, or neglectful behavior. This cycle is what creates the Jekyll and Hyde comparisons to narcissistic personalities, where it seems as if they actually have two or more separate personalities, one good and one bad. This dynamic is caused by splitting, which is the process by which narcissistic personalities attempt to understand whole object relations. Whole object relations is the understanding of all aspects of an object and processing it into a cohesive, total understanding of the whole thing. Pathologically narcissistic people have extreme difficulty with this, and as a result, their brain creates two different, separate images of the same object when contradictory characteristics are encountered. This means that if somebody does something that does not fit in with the narcissistic person's understanding of what a good person is, this creates extreme stress because they can't integrate this information into their already existing information about that person. You can't be good if you're bad. You can't be bad if you're good. A new image of that person has to be created by the brain in order to hold this new contradictory information. This usually looks like a split, where one understanding of the person is all good and the other is all bad. Ironically, because narcissists engage in splitting, they may actually accuse the other person of having what seems like multiple personalities or flipping like a switch, when in actuality, it is they who are doing that. They just can't see it. To them, the problem really does seem to be the other person. Splitting is one of the biggest things that causes the narcissistic behavioral cycle, because not only does the narcissist hold split images of other people, they hold split images of themselves as well. Something is either good or it's bad. It's black or it's white. That's it. How can something be good if it's also bad? How can something be black if it's also white? Gray areas are too difficult to understand, and they cause extreme confusion and stress for pathologically narcissistic personalities, so they just don't exist. You and everything else, including themselves, is either one or the other. Even when they claim to understand this, observation of their behavior and their mindsets usually proves that they really don't. The cycle of narcissistic relationships alternates between idealization and devaluation. Idealization is when you are seen as all good, which is to say perfect and therefore very, very valuable. Devaluation is when you are seen as all bad, which is to say flawed and therefore completely worthless. The good times with narcissistic personalities are predicated not on love, but on idealization, which is an imaginary way of viewing something as perfect and more valuable than it really is. The bad times with narcissistic personalities are predicated not on hatred or indifference, but on devaluation, which is an imaginary way of viewing something as more flawed and less valuable than it really is. As you can see, this cycle fits in with the psychological process of splitting exactly, and it fits in with what we know overall about narcissists. Neither idealization nor devaluation are about the other person at all. They include no realistic understanding of the other person in any way. They are about the narcissist's affected and even delusional way of seeing other people and themselves. When things are bad with narcissists, or when the relationship has ended, it is common to romanticize the good times, to remember them as perfect or as better than they really were. This is partly because compared to the bad times, the good times really can seem amazing. Of course, if all you ever ate was cardboard, a $2 steak would be amazing too. Your perception is influenced by the information you have. The daily recommended calorie intake for adults is between 2,000 and 3,000 calories a day, right? If someone eats 30,000 calories a day and then they decide to cut that to 15,000 calories a day, their perception may be that they're starving now, when in actuality they are still grossly overeating. If someone is used to it being 110 degrees Fahrenheit every single day, 80 degrees Fahrenheit may feel much cooler or maybe even chilly. It's important to challenge our perceptions with reality to be sure that we're able to see things as they really are. No one is starving if they're eating 15,000 calories a day, no matter how they feel. 80 degrees Fahrenheit is not cold, regardless of how someone perceives it. The good times with narcissists are often not really good times, even if, by comparison, they seem to be. Part of the reason for that is that their toxic narcissism shines through even during the good times. It's easy to believe that narcissists' bad behavior only comes out in the bad times, especially comparatively speaking. However, the longer the relationship goes on, people start to realize that this is actually not true. Much of this is on display throughout the relationship, no matter what phase of the cycle that it's in, especially the lack of empathy, the selfishness, and the egocentricity for which they are known. This never goes away, and the truth is, it usually isn't even hidden that well. People just don't realize what they're seeing, or they interpret it as something else. It is only through constant exposure to the behavior and more extreme examples over time that people realize what it is, and more importantly, that it's been there all along. If you find that you are caught up in romanticizing the good times, ask yourself if they really were that good or if they just seem good by comparison. Were you ever really truly supported by this person? Was there ever any real connection between you two as people? Did anything you ever cared about really ever matter? Were you ever truly seen by them? Were you ever really heard by them? The narcissistic cycle ensnares the ego with idealization by building it up to tremendous heights and then crushing the ego brutally with devaluation, seemingly at random or for no reason. This is a cycle that intoxicates the ego, inflates the ego, and even tricks it into falling in love with its own importance, then rips all that away, which causes the ego to endlessly chase for more, trying to explain, trying to prove, trying to reason, in the hopes of receiving idealization again. But this cycle is not based on real emotions or actual love at all. Idealization definitely feels good. Anyone would like to be considered perfect. It's like being in the first infatuating part of a relationship all the time, but it's not love. It can't be because there's no bonding, no intimacy, it's not based in reality in any way, and it includes no real understanding of the other person as a person at all. Even if you have genuine feelings for this person, you are missing and romanticizing idealization from them, not love. And you don't need idealization. It's just as toxic as devaluation. I hope this clears a few things up for you. As always, I look forward to your comments, questions, and suggestions, so please keep those coming. I take appointments online, over the phone, via text, via messenger, via email, through Skype, and I do personal video Q&As worldwide. So if you're interested in speaking with me one-on-one, you can visit littleshaman.org and click the Book an Appointment tab to go ahead and do that. I teach workshops, seminars, and clinics several times a year. So if you're interested in seeing what we're running this month, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that as well. You've been listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by BetterHelp.com and littleshaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. May the Great Spirit bless you and have a wonderful day. Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and I wanted to talk to you for a couple minutes about promises made during hoovering. Narcissists can be very good at seeming contrite and willing to work on things, especially when threatened with loss. If you want to explore whether the promises made during a Hoover are real, you can do that by asking some probing questions. Hoovering behavior and the sudden epiphanies that narcissistic people are infamous for can be very confusing for people. The safest response is, of course, no response. However, this is not always how it goes. So if you are somebody who is in the middle of a Hoover right now and you're confused and wanting to know if you should trust in that, one of the ways you can do that is by asking reasonable, specific questions regarding the promises this person is making. Anybody who truly understands and is willing to fix the things that are the problem should be able to answer these questions without getting angry, without blaming other people. Questions like, how are you going to fix the problem? What do you believe the problem actually is? Why does this problem happen? How are you going to implement whatever solution that you've come up with? Why do you think the thing you are doing or not doing should be changed, right? If someone is simply telling you what they believe you want to hear or simply repeating things that they know that you have said, there's probably not going to be any satisfactory answers to these questions, and it's probably going to get obvious really fast. You might get answers like, it's a problem because you don't like it, which says nothing about the inherently wrong or hurtful nature of the behavior and takes no responsibility for it at all. You might get answers like, well, I'm just not going to do it anymore, which doesn't address the cause or causes of the problem and is not a viable solution. Changing any behavior requires acknowledgement that the behavior is problematic and doing real, consistent work to change it. by adapting mindsets, making different choices, blah, blah, blah. Any solution that doesn't include plans for these things is not a real solution because it won't work. Now, it can be tricky. Sometimes they can have what seems to be a good answer, but then the more you probe, the more questions you ask, the deeper you try to go, you find that it's obvious they really have put no thought into this, or they don't really understand the situation, much less how to fix it. And of course, there's no real desire to fix it. This is simply throwing stuff at a wall and see what sticks. A word of caution, however, narcissists may react very badly to being questioned or pushed into giving answers that they really don't have. Once again, the safest course of action is to ignore the Hoover and continue with or go no contact. So I hope that clears a few things up for you. May the Great Spirit bless you. Have a beautiful day. Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and you're listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by BetterHelp.com and LittleShaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. Today I wanted to talk to you about the fact that you will always be a stranger to a narcissist. This is something a lot of people have trouble understanding, so I thought we could talk about it on the show today. One of the most confusing things about dealing with pathologically narcissistic people is that they never seem to get to know you. Not only are they usually completely uninterested in you as a person or in anything about you that they cannot somehow benefit from or that does not specifically and solely relate to them somehow, but it appears that they can't get to know people even if they try. Their brain creates an image of a person in their mind, and that becomes the sum of their knowledge of that person. It's inflexible, it does not evolve or change, and it is often not based on facts or reality anyway. This is one of the biggest reasons these relationships eventually fail. The narcissist cannot understand that things, people, and situations can and do change. They will never accept that, and they will never allow this to happen in their perception. Anything wrong that someone did or that the narcissist thinks they did or thinks they would have done when the person was upset or when they were a child or when it was 10 years ago or anything else is considered to be the kind of person they are and will always be. This perception never changes, and it cannot be influenced by reality, facts, proof, or anything else. It is rigid and extremely inflexible. This causes enormous problems in their relationships. When you get to know somebody, you start to learn about aspects of their personality and their character, such as whether they're somebody who keeps their word, if they're honest, if they're responsible, if they are reliable, things that would be typical for them to do or say. This does not seem to happen with narcissistic people. They are never able to see what kind of person someone actually is, even if they did actually care to know. And consequently, they're never able to trust anybody. They don't really understand having a fixed identity that doesn't change, and that some people are unlikely to do some things. They can't learn from experience, and nothing overrides their perceptions, which they actually don't trust anyway. They don't trust themselves, and because of that, they cannot trust you or anyone. Narcissists often become enmeshed with people due to poor boundaries, but though this creates an unhealthy closeness and dependency, it is not true intimacy, and it does not translate to actually getting to know who, how, and what someone is. They end up feeling simply controlled by the other person because they're dependent on them, and they usually really, really fear and resent that. Enmeshment is often described as not knowing where you end and the other person begins. People who are enmeshed may believe they know the other person really well, or that they are experiencing intimacy, but in actuality they are too close to the other person, and they're unable to view them objectively or separately from themselves. Their own needs and emotions have gotten totally wrapped up in the other person and the relationship, and they can no longer see either one of these things clearly. Narcissists may be able to feel marginally more safe with someone who has never caused them a narcissistic injury. However, this does not translate into trust because their fear that this will change does not go away no matter how much time has passed, and the behavior that narcissists exhibit because of this fear often causes people to inflict narcissistic injury on them in self-defense. For example, let's say that a narcissist feels marginally safe with a new partner because the new partner doesn't know anything negative about them and they still believe that the narcissist is their dream come true. The narcissist enjoys this immensely and they would love it to continue, but they have zero faith in that at all. Their fear, which is really paranoia, that this will change causes them to begin to accuse their new partner of cheating or of not caring about them and things like that. This causes their partner to be hurt and confused, often leading them to pull away or respond in a negative way. This in return causes the narcissist to feel abandoned and rejected, which provokes a narcissistic injury. In the narcissist's view, this person has now become unsafe and therefore they're untrustworthy. It's all downhill from here. The only way to be considered safe and therefore trustworthy by a narcissist would be to never be linked to a narcissistic injury in their perception. This means to never expose them in any way, never hurt them in any way, never upset them in any way, never question them in any way, never correct them in any way, never see them as having a flaw or making a mistake ever. Always view them as completely, totally perfect and live with them in their false reality. This is, of course, not possible, not just because they're not perfect, but also because the narcissist's reality is not actuality, and the things they feel exposed or injured by cannot be predicted with any true reliability. Their interpretations of people's motives or actions are hard to understand and often impossible to foresee. Because of this, it is not possible to remain safe in a narcissist's perception. They live in a perpetual state of fear, flux, and vulnerability where anyone is capable of any and everything at any time, no matter how much proof or experience to the contrary they may have. Of course, anyone is capable of anything, and even if we don't think something is true or we don't want to believe something, if we have proof that someone has done something, we should take that seriously. But, for example, a person could never have stolen anything from the narcissist or anyone for the entire 30 years or 20 years the narcissist has known them, but the narcissist will still believe this person will steal from them, especially if they are upset at the person or if they believe the person is upset with them. No other reason, no other facts or proof, just I think they will do that or that they did do that, and this means they will do it or that they did do it. The fact that they have 30 years worth of experience that point to the conclusion that this person is not a thief does not matter. Feelings are facts to a narcissist, and that's all there is to it. They feel this person will steal from them, and so the fact is, they will. No benefit of the doubt, no accepting someone's statements based on good faith, no consideration of anything to the contrary at all. The past means nothing. Experience means nothing. Reality means nothing. They believe everyone to be as unstable and terrified and ruthless as they are, and that's where it ends. Once a person has become unsafe, they are always unsafe. No apology is accepted, no explanation is entertained, and no correction of the narcissist's conclusion or perception is allowed. They do not genuinely accept apologies for either real or imagined wrongs done to them. They do not accept solutions to try to repair issues or resolve problems. They do not try to understand anyone else's side or point. They do not let things go or move on from things. They don't understand that things and people change, and they will not allow this perception. If reality does not convince someone of itself, you certainly have no hope of doing so. It is a pointless exercise to try to build or maintain a relationship of any kind with a person who has gotten to know you no better and has no more trust in you after 5 or 10 or 20 years than they had the day they met you. I hope this clears a few things up for you. As always, I look forward to your comments, questions, and suggestions, so please keep those coming. I take appointments online, over the phone, via text, via messenger, via email, and through Skype worldwide for international clients. So if you're interested in speaking with me one-on-one, you can visit littleshaman.org and click the Book an Appointment tab to do that. I teach workshops, seminars, and clinics throughout the year, so if you're interested in seeing what we're running this month, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that as well. You've been listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by BetterHelp.com and LittleShaman.org. That's me, the Little Shaman. May the Great Spirit bless you and have a wonderful day. Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and I just wanted to talk to you for a few minutes about narcissists and magic tricks. You know, one of the biggest reasons no contact with narcissists is recommended so strongly is because your brain tends to believe what your eyes and your ears tell it, even if this contradicts known facts. Consider magic tricks and optical illusions. The reason people like them so much is because their eyes and their ears are telling them that it's real, even though their brain knows that it's not. This is what happens when you are around a narcissistic personality, except magic tricks are harmless and this relationship is not. One of the most common things people say regarding these relationships is that they're trying to internalize the information they have learned about narcissistic personalities, but they're having a really hard time and they feel very confused. Almost without fail, these are people who are still in the relationship in some way. This is one of the reasons no contact is so important. It's not possible to come to acceptance when there is conflicting information being thrown at you constantly. What you know does not match up with what your eyes and your ears are telling your brain, and the result can be massive confusion. Your brain tends to rely on your eyes and your ears, which results in believing the magic trick even though you know it's not real. Believing in a magic trick for 5 minutes at a magic show is harmless. Being unable to accept the reality about a predatory relationship is not. Going no contact stops or reduces the constant influx of contradictory information so that you can focus on accepting what you know to be the reality of the situation rather than exhausting yourself trying to incorporate and process conflicting information where it doesn't fit. The narcissist's self-portrayal often does not match up with what you know to be the facts about them, and in many ways, this is absolutely deliberate. Accept this as a reality and stop trying to make sense out of it. It's never going to make sense because it is directly and deliberately contradictory. The way to stop the confusion is to get out of the situation. There is no way you can become educated enough about something to be able to completely disregard what your eyes and your ears are telling your brain. This is not going to happen. It's how your brain works. The confusion will end when the contradictory information stops. So I hope that clears a few things up for you. As always, I look forward to your comments, questions, and suggestions, so please keep those coming. I take appointments online, over the phone, via text, via messenger, via email, and through Skype worldwide. So if you're interested in speaking with me one-on-one, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that, as well as see what workshops, seminars, or clinics we are offering this month. Also, we have a support group that we are doing starting in January. It's called the Sacred Healing Recovery Group. If you're interested in that, you can find out about it on littleshaman.org as well. You've been listening to the Meditations and More podcast, brought to you by BetterHelp.com and littleshaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. May the Great Spirit bless you. Have a beautiful day. Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and I just wanted to talk to you for a few minutes about trying to redeem yourself in the eyes of narcissistic people. When you are dealing with narcissists who are holding the past against you, remember two things. Number one, you cannot ever erase or unhappen things that are in the past. And number two, short of doing that, nothing is ever going to be good enough. Years can go by before you discover this. Years that you spend trying to explain, trying to be understood, trying to apologize, trying to move on, only to find that it's not possible. Any failure in the narcissist's eyes is permanent and irredeemable. It doesn't even have to have actually happened. Their belief that it did is all that's required. If you admit it, you're a bad person. If you deny it, you're a liar. There is no reasonable way to deal with this. There's no forgiveness, no empathy, no understanding, no consideration, no benefit of the doubt, no good faith, no redemption, no moving on. The loss is permanent. Relationships obviously cannot exist within this framework. People are not perfect. They will hurt each other sometimes. They will do or say the wrong thing sometimes. They will make mistakes sometimes. Narcissists simply cannot accept that. They are so fragile that not only is there no room for them to be a human being, there's no room for anybody else to be one either. Any deviation from perfection seems to be seen as a permanent failure. The fact that it could happen at all is evidence of how unsafe, unreliable, untrustworthy, etc. somebody is. This is unforgivable, no matter why it happened, no matter how long it's been. A side effect of this mindset can also be that the narcissist is unable to move on from some self-imposed shame regarding things that they have done, and they claim that you are the person who will not let it go. At any rate, stop trying to redeem yourself in the eyes of a narcissist. The loss is permanent. It cannot be repaired. It is a favorite claim of narcissists in general that some failure or lack or mistake on the part of the other person is responsible for the problems in the relationship. And if that person can just redeem themselves in the narcissist's eyes, everything will be okay. Many narcissistic personalities may actually really believe that. The problem is that it's not true. The deep, deep insecurity and pathological distrust that are inherent in this personality structure make intimacy and trust impossible for them. They don't seem to realize that, however, and they can't take ownership of it anyway. Most probably really do believe the problem is the other person or the other people. They may say all the right things, but when it comes down to it, they simply cannot or will not do the things necessary to trust other people and repair relationships. This is considered to be your problem. If you can't fix it and you can't fix how they feel about it, you're going to get what you deserve. If you don't believe that this is how it is, ask yourself a few questions. Has this ever worked before? Does this person seem to legitimately trust anybody? Have they ever done so? Does this person seem willing to give you the benefit of the doubt in any way? Are they approaching things from an open-minded place with good faith? Does this person seem able to understand and empathize with your mindset or your situation or anything about you? Is this person actually willing to forgive and move on? Are they capable of doing these things? Is this person more invested in punishing you or in understanding and resolving? Does this person accept your explanations, your reasons, etc.? Do they even listen to these things? Do they keep bringing something up, no matter how long it has been, no matter how many times it has already been addressed? Make sure when you're looking at the answers to these questions, you are going off the person's actions, not their words. Many people say they are willing to do things, but their actions prove that they're really not. Many people say they trust others, but their actions prove that they really don't. Complicating this even further is the more a narcissistic person feels you're trying to convince them or change their mind, in essence, to manipulate them, the harder they are likely to resist and push back against what you're saying. When they don't feel you're trying to convince them, the more likely they are to believe that you don't care anymore and you're rejecting them and abandoning them. You cannot win here. This is unreasonable, illogical, and ridiculous. The more you try, the less they believe you. The less you try, the less they believe you. They don't believe you. 2 + 2 = 4, right? The basic thing here is that you should keep putting in all of this effort to convince them because it proves to them that they matter, even though the fact that you're trying so hard causes them to distrust your motives even more than they already do, and even though their contrary childish nature precludes them from even listening anyway. Most also have a deep-seated distrust. This often includes a fear of being controlled, manipulated, brainwashed, tricked, which makes considering anything anyone says almost impossible, especially if they're being contradicted. However, despite all of that, as soon as you stop trying to convince them, you may be immediately accused of not caring. This is not about you or what you are saying. So you have to get your mind around that fact. It's all about the attention and the focus and the energy you are pouring onto the narcissist in your attempts to get them to believe you, accept you, validate, whatever you're trying to do. That is what matters. What you want from them does not matter. It's not considered. It has not mattered. It will not matter, and you will not get it. What matters is you trying to get it. It is extreme effort that doesn't benefit you in any way. It's like being a hamster running on a wheel that is hooked up to a machine. Your energy is powering the machine and benefiting the people that are using that machine, but you are not getting anywhere, and you never will. So I hope that clears a few things up for you. May the Great Spirit bless you. Have a beautiful day. Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and I just wanted to talk to you for a few minutes about something that's really important. We talked about things that are said during a Hoover, promises that are made in a recent video. One of the other things that can happen during a Hoover is the narcissistic person may apologize. Don't be fooled by an apology. Because of the myth that narcissistic people never apologize, people might believe that if someone seems to have apologized, they are either not a narcissist or there has been some kind of breakthrough. However, someone who has learned to say that they're sorry after doing the same wrong or hurtful things over and over again is not someone who has changed and is not someone who is trying to change. This is someone who has learned that saying they're sorry is the price they need to pay to keep the relationship while still being able to do these wrong or hurtful things. Real remorse leads to changed behavior. Anyone can learn to say anything, whether they're a narcissist or not. You might have heard me say before that even a cannibal can learn to recite the Apostles' Creed. That means anybody can say anything. It's true that, generally speaking, narcissistic people are not big on apologies because they're either unwilling or unable to take responsibility for themselves or their behavior. However, that does not translate into them being incapable of saying words that sound like an apology, especially if they believe they're going to benefit from doing that or if they feel boxed into a place where there's no other choice. Many narcissistic people will say they are sorry or otherwise attempt to apologize in that situation. Most of these so-called apologies are pretty threadbare and they will not stand up to scrutiny, but some narcissistic people are good at making it sound like they're taking accountability and responsibility for their behavior even though they are not. Some may even believe they actually are doing that. But true understanding of and remorse for one's behavior leads to changed behavior, and it does not take years for that to happen. Due to the level of shame that narcissistic people operate underneath, they can be capable of seeming very genuinely remorseful and upset. They may apologize in a very grandiose fashion. They may become extremely upset when telling you how sorry they are. But there's a difference between shame and remorse. What you are seeing is shame. There is a video or two on the channel about the difference between these two things. Don't be fooled by apologies, whether they seem real or not. A true apology comes with changed behavior. So I hope that clears a few things up for you. May the Great Spirit bless you. Have a beautiful day. Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and you're listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by shamanspiritcenter.com and littleshaman.org. That's me, the Little Shaman. Today, I wanted to talk to you about how to resist a Hoover in narcissistic or otherwise toxic relationships. For those who may not know, hoovering is what it's called when a toxic person tries to suck you back into the relationship with promises of doing better, declarations of love, or demonstrations of remorse. This is something virtually everyone dealing with an abusive or narcissistic person faces due to the push-pull nature of these relationships, so I thought we could talk about it on the show today. It's important to remember, too, that though most of the time people who talk about hoovering are referring to a romantic relationship, it generally happens in all abusive relationships, including those that involve family members. Hoovering is one of the reasons getting out of these relationships is so difficult. It's essentially recycled love bombing. After a period of devaluation where a person is treated terribly and sometimes even a discard, where they're thrown away like they don't matter, the narcissist suddenly becomes exactly what the victim has been waiting for. Kind, attentive, remorseful, interested. They may seem to totally get the problem and swear they will fix it. They may promise to do all the things they refused to do before: get married, go to therapy, take a vacation, stop drinking, take their medication, stop seeing other people. They may suddenly become easy to talk to and invested in the relationship. Though most do try to claim remorse for their behavior, in some situations, the devaluation they put the victim through is not mentioned at all. They simply behave as if nothing ever happened. In all situations, the victim, who is often overjoyed with this turning over of a new leaf, wants to believe in all of this and simply goes along with it. It's easier, and more importantly, it's what they've wanted all along. After months or even years of this cycle, it becomes a behavioral addiction that can be very difficult to get out of. Both the narcissist and the victim are addicted to the reward of hoovering, where all is forgiven and there is love and peace for a time. Because both are addicted to the reward, both often work hard to make it happen. Even victims who have left or ended the relationship may try to create a situation where it's possible for the narcissist to hoover them so that the cycle can be completed and they can feel better. If the narcissist does not hoover, the victim may become angry, anxious, or even panic. They may reach out to the narcissist in an effort to control the situation and bring about the completion of the cycle where everyone feels good again, everything's back to good. Everyone involved in this situation, including the narcissist, is trying to do the same thing, make themselves feel better. This is what addiction is, the pathological pursuit of reward even when there are hurtful or dangerous consequences to the reward-seeking behavior. A pattern of being in toxic relationships is almost always a behavioral addiction. Sometimes people don't want to hear that, but it's the truth. Healthy relationships don't provide the drama, the intense highs and lows that a toxic relationship does, and because of that, they're often unattractive to people who are living with the challenge of this particular behavioral addiction. This is nothing to be embarrassed or ashamed of, by the way. It's usually caused by childhood conditioning, and it's not anybody's fault. Addressing it is everybody's responsibility, though. Many people mistakenly believe that these feelings are love. It's probably true that you do genuinely care about the narcissist in your life, but it's also true that love is not what causes this behavior. It's really important to understand and accept the addiction component of the situation so that you can understand why no contact is so important. The only way to break the cycle is to disrupt it. That means you have to let it go without being completed. The cycle must go uncompleted. Otherwise, it's just going to continue. Even if this particular relationship ends, it will continue with other people or in other ways. For example, this is why people go from toxic relationships with their parents to toxic romantic relationships. The cycle must be broken, and better ways to get these needs met must be created. It's just like any other addiction. In order to quit, you have to stop using. One of the ways you stop using is by resisting the Hoover. We're going to talk about 4 ways to do that, and if you have any others that have helped you, share them in the comments below so that other people can use them too. The first and best way to do this is by going no contact. There's no way to overstate how well this works. The narcissist cannot Hoover you if they cannot contact you, period. Sometimes no contact is not possible. For example, a person might have children with the narcissist and be required to have contact with them by the court. In almost all other situations, though, no contact is possible and should be used if a person truly wants to end the cycle. If it's possible for you to go no contact, but you have not been able to enforce or maintain no contact, it's really important to ask yourself why and to be honest with your answer. The voice of addiction is sneaky. It's very persuasive. Are you still in your addiction? Is it still driving your behavior? Have you really done everything you could to make sure this person cannot contact you? If not, explore why. And remember, no contact is not just not talking to somebody. No contact is no contact. No looking at their social media, no asking friends about them, no driving by their house to see if their car is there, nothing. All of these things are addiction behaviors. They perpetuate the cycle that you're trying to break. No contact is no contact. Number 2, be realistic and honest with yourself about what a Hoover really is. Hoovering is hard to resist because it creates a perception in the victim that they're going to get the love that they want, finally. The same way people misidentify their own unhealthy or addictive behaviors as love, they misidentify the narcissist's unhealthy and addictive behaviors as love too. Hoovering is not about love. It's not about passion. It's not about finally seeing the light. It's about control. Hoovering is not desperation for love. It's desperation for control. The narcissist is desperate to get the relationship back to a point where they can control it and get what they want. Often so is the victim, which is one reason Hoovering is so effective. Both people believe they're getting what they want. Narcissists do not Hoover people because they love them. It's not proof the narcissist loves you. It's not proof they want you. It's proof they become scared they can't control the situation anymore and may not get what they want, whatever that is. Be honest with yourself about what a Hoover is and what the narcissist really wants. They're Hoovering you because they believe they will be able to bring you back under control. Hoovering is about owning people. It is not about love. As soon as you agree to come back under control, the cycle of abuse starts again. That is not love. Number 3, remind yourself of the cycles. Unless this is the first time this has ever happened to you, then you've been through a Hoover before. You've heard the promises, you've seen the tears, you've seen the hysteria, you've dealt with the desperation. You know what this is really about. After you've been in one of these relationships for a while, you start to see that these relationships do not evolve. Nothing changes. They simply run through a cycle over and over again. Not just the abuse cycle that we're all so familiar with, but a cycle of the narcissist's overall behavior. For example, after a time of not working, they may become more responsible. That can look like an evolution, but if you stay in the relationship long enough, you will likely witness a return to the irresponsible behavior. They may be physically abusive and then stop, which can look like evolution, but often, given the fullness of time, they will return to that behavior again. It's the same with everything. The problems you had 5 years ago or 6 months ago are the same problems you have now or will have 10 years from now. The same promises you heard last year are the same ones you hear this year. It doesn't change. And it can take people years to really see, because the cycle can look like evolution when it really isn't. So remind yourself of the cycles here. What's really changed? Have you heard these things before? Were the problems you had last year the same as the ones you have now? What has happened to make you really think this is any different? Now, sometimes people will say things like, well, the narcissist cried, or they apologized, or they deleted their social media, something like that, but they never did that before. That might be true for now, but if you stick around a few more years, you'll probably see it again. So think about the cycles. Number 4, work on you and getting your needs met the right way. The best way to resist hoovering is to get to a place where it's not attractive to you anymore. You do that by doing the work on yourself to heal the vulnerabilities you have to toxic relationships in the first place. This work is not easy, and it takes time to do, but it's so worth it in the end. Work on first identifying the dysfunctional patterns in your life. From there, you can address the conditioning you've been subjected to that created these patterns, and you can address the old wounds that resulted in your being conditioned to think, feel, or behave in unhealthy ways. Once you address those old wounds, you can break that conditioning and reprogram yourself with new, healthier behavior. It helps to look at this as a different way of being, rather than work you're trying to do to get to a certain point. Healing is a journey, it's not a destination. It's not like one day you wake up and you're healed, like how you wake up and you don't have the flu anymore. Healing a spirit sickness, which is what this is a change in mindset over time, a gradual awakening and understanding of how things have become the way that they are. It's looking at old things in a new light with the same eyes. It takes time, and the sooner you can stop being distracted by someone else's healing and spirit sickness, you can start focusing on your own. That is the key to this whole thing. I hope this clears a few things up for you. As always, I look forward to your comments, questions, and suggestions, so please keep those coming. I take appointments online, over the phone, via text, via messenger, via email, and through Skype. So if you're interested in speaking with me one-on-one, you can visit littleshaman.org to go ahead and do that. I teach workshops a few times a month, so if you're interested in seeing what we have going on, you can do that at littleshaman.org as well. You've been listening to the Meditations and More podcast, brought to you by shamanspiritcenter.com and littleshaman.org. That's me, the Little Shaman. May the Great Spirit bless you, and have a wonderful day. Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and I just wanted to talk to you for a few minutes about the reality of narcissists. Trying to get along with narcissists on a basic day-to-day basis requires making a ridiculous, almost superhuman effort, and even on top of that, it still doesn't work. People eventually get sick of exerting so much effort for nothing. It's frustrating, it's exhausting, it's crazy-making, and perhaps most importantly, it's pointless. It doesn't work. You cannot reason with the unreasonable, so you have to stop trying. You will never make them understand the point, no matter what you do. They don't want to understand, and many of them are not capable of understanding anyway. They don't think the same way that you do, and you cannot make them. The only thing you can do is decide if you want somebody who behaves this way in your life or not. Because the reality is, this is a person who has a legitimate problem. Personality is the expression of identity. The false self or selves that you see in pathologically narcissistic people are the expression of an unstable or even non-existent identity through the framework of a fractured, compartmentalized, and non-collaborative personality structure. It means the parts of their personality don't work together. They're not cohesive as a whole. The false self is a primitive, immature survival mechanism created as a result of not having a cohesive identity through which to form a stable personality. Without that, and due to lack of development that may or may not be the result of that, many fundamental functions and tasks either cannot be performed or can't be performed the way that people without these difficulties perform them. Parallel abilities must be created in order to do that, in order to survive. Examples of that would be using mimicry instead of empathy and enmeshment instead of actual bonding. Securing narcissistic supply is a requirement for the regulation of this personality because due to their dysfunction, they're unable to regulate themselves through any other means. It's necessary for survival. Being unable to regulate the self is not an option for any human being, and it leads to collapse. Presenting false selves to the world is a way to achieve that. It's also a way to combat the shame that they feel all the time, this omnipresent toxic shame. The qualities and the characteristics expressed through this false self or false selves may in fact be genuine qualities and characteristics held by this person, or they could be a complete fabrication designed to extract narcissistic supply from the environment. It can depend on how far down the narcissistic spectrum they are and a couple other things. But either way, the function of the false self and the utilization, the using of people around the narcissist remains the same no matter what, doesn't matter. The more we can understand about the way that this pathology functions, the more sense we can make of the behavior. Making sense of the behavior is very important in order to understand what happened so that you can move on. That's very, very important. If you're dealing with a narcissist, there are a few things you really need to know. Because of what we were just discussing regarding the fact that this is a legitimate problem. It's a personality dysfunction. They don't think the way that you do. They do not see things the way that you do. They do not perceive things the way that you do. They don't feel things the way that you do. They don't understand things the way that you do. They don't even understand that these things are true, that this is the case. They don't care that this is the case. They don't know that they don't care. They don't know that they don't understand. And you cannot teach them any of these things. These things are really important to understand. If you're dealing with a pathologically narcissistic person, you're dealing with someone who has a legitimate problem with the way that their personality functions. It's not something that you can teach or convince them not to have anymore. Though it is a legitimate and serious problem, it's very important to remember also, this does not excuse their behavior or their choices. They know right from wrong. Lack of empathy, difficulty with impulse control, skewed perception, and impairment regarding cognition causes them not to care, but they know. And they're therefore accountable for these things. Now, the point of saying this is a legitimate problem is not so that people will feel sorry for them or to excuse any of their behavior. You do that at your own risk. This is genuinely dangerous thinking that puts people in harm's way, like trying to hug a lion in a cage because you feel bad for him. It needs to be said, though, so that people really understand this is not just a case of someone choosing to be mean or even abusive who might then choose to stop being mean or abusive if they can see how much they're hurting other people. It is far beyond that, and you are not going to be able to change this. If you're waiting for that to happen, it won't. Someone cannot stop being affected by disorder or dysfunction just because we want them to stop being affected by it. And someone with this particular problem is not going to understand or care why they should not engage in manipulative or exploitative behavior. It's just not going to register with them. You cannot love the pathology out of someone, and they cannot love you enough to somehow attain non-pathological functioning. Sometimes we hear from narcissists, from anybody. It happens all the time. People say, if you really loved me, you wouldn't act that way, or you would act this way. While this can be true in a factual sense, because certainly someone who loves you does not intentionally mistreat you, framing someone's behavior this way can be dangerous and unfair. Other people's behavior is not about or caused by us, and framing it in this way implies that it is. This can create the idea that if we're good enough, people give us what we want or what we think we deserve, but if we're not, then they don't. That's not reality. The reality is that right or wrong, fair or unfair, good or bad, people give us what they want to give us and are capable of giving us. It's not even about us or what we deserve or how good we are or our value or anything else. Looking at it this way implies that we're somehow responsible for this person's behavior. That's dangerous thinking, and it's false. It also implies that the only reason for someone's choices or their decisions or their behavior are their feelings for us. This is not reality either, even when we're talking about their behavior toward us or in the relationship. People make choices or react based on millions of pieces of information that they have stored up over the years, their beliefs, their thoughts, their experiences, their feelings. Very few of these pieces of information actually have anything to do with us, and often they don't have anything to even do with what's going on in that moment or in this situation. That's really important to understand. Lastly, if you're dealing with someone who has a legitimate problem, such as an addiction or a mental health challenge, expecting that to improve or even go away if they love you enough is not only unfair, that's just totally unrealistic. This does not mean that we should ever tolerate toxic or abusive behavior, but it does mean that we really need to pay attention to what our expectations are in these situations. There are some things that love cannot conquer. So I hope that clears a few things up for you. May the Great Spirit bless you. Have a beautiful day.